The Metal Gear Solid series may no longer exist, but fans can still get their spy thriller fix from a surprising source: TV. In recent years, espionage action dramas have solidified into a new and vivacious genre. Here are my picks any MGS fan should check out. 1. Deutchland 83. Deutchland 83 is loosely based on the Able Archer incident of the same year. The Able Archer exercises were yearly defense simulations conducted in Western Europe by NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. However, in 1983, the Kremlin observed that year's Able Archer simulation could possibly be a ruse to conceal a real nuclear first strike. The involvement of foreign heads of state in the simulation, as well as ciphers and extended radio silence, all struck the Soviets as unusual, and the geopolitical situation was already tense given the simultaneous deployment in West Germany of NATO's next-generation nuclear missile, the Pershing II. What resulted has been called the closest the world has come to a second Cuban Missile Crisis. And right in the middle, with the least authority yet the most to lose, was a Germany literally still split in two by global geopolitics, as it had been ever since World War II. Deutchland 83 was created by Anna Winger, an American expat from Berlin. Using Able Archer 83 as a backdrop, the first season follows codename Kolibri, or Hummingbird, aka Martin Rausch, a young East German border guard conscripted by the communist secret police to infiltrate the West as a mole. Kolibri has to learn the spy trade fast, or he'll wind up on the naughty list of the Stasi, quote, one of the most effective and repressive intelligence and secret police agencies ever to have existed, according to Wikipedia. Yet anything he may do, on purpose or not, risks triggering nuclear global annihilation. Watching such a nice kid forced into all manner of skullduggery makes for a tense and cathartic experience. Deutchland 83 ultimately is a reflection on German identity, national unification, and how yesterday becomes today. Fans of MGS should appreciate its extensive research and authenticity, but also its great heart and overall message of humanism in the face of machines, bombs, and the utter ruthlessness of geopolitics. 2. Berlin Station. Also set in Germany, Berlin Station takes a completely opposite track from Deutchland 83. It's set post 9/11 and details the intrigues not of infiltration but rather counterintelligence. Richard Armitage plays Daniel Miller, a CIA officer. He's first tasked with hunting down the traitor behind the Edward Snowden-like whistleblowing of one Thomas Shaw. Season 2, meanwhile, tackles the resurgence of Germany's far right, while Season 3, the series' last, transitions to another important city for spies, Budapest, Hungary. Exactly like MGS, Berlin Station is well versed in American covert and clandestine operations, without the naked adoration of, say, Tom Clancy. It takes a mostly critical tone, in fact, evidenced by the rather perfect opening theme, I'm Afraid of Americans. And if the presence of David Bowie wasn't MGS enough, Berlin Station's got enough twists and turns and glimpses at different cultures to make any MGS fan's day, or week if you're into binging. 3. Fauda. The Israeli series Fauda has the authenticity, the action, and the overall compassion that all defined Metal Gear Solid. Created by two actual former members of what you might call the IDF or IOF, depending on your politics, Fauda tries to empathize with the Palestinians while showing that even good people can lose their souls in the whirlwinds of war, regardless of their ethnicity or nationality. Fauda also showcases the Gaza Strip conflict remains a total war, with women and children considered fair game, and often taking part in the fighting. Obviously, the show's from an Israeli point of view, so they usually get to resemble cops while the Palestinians resemble the criminals, but that doesn't mean that Fauda's empty propaganda. In fact, this neat division between black hat and white hat gets subverted in this show. In MGS fashion, Fauda has everything from hospital escapes, foiled terror attacks to fake deaths. But more importantly, Fauda is a case study in extremism and the all-consuming seduction by a lust for revenge. 4. Mr.Robot. Sam Ishmael's Mr.Robot is not strictly speaking a traditional spy show. But as every MGS fan ought know, the age of humans has given way to SIGINT, Signals Intelligence, and that in turn has coincided with a new world order run by information and cryptography. Mr.Robot's about one of these cryptographers, who, in a sense, defects from that new world order. But just like in MGS, in Mr.Robot, the terrorists are no less deranged or morally compromised than their more powerful enemy. Following the neuroatypical protagonist Elliot Alderson, a cybersecurity engineer with a rather tenuous grip on reality, Mr.Robot recalls the glory days of MGS2. It's a gripping and experimental techno-thriller where fact and fiction become completely blurred. Apart from rooting itself in the real world of cybersecurity, there are many MGS staples in Mr.Robot as well. Daddy issues, gender-flipped moles, infiltration, and even a shadowy Patriots-like conspiracy that dictates world events. Mr.Robot's a must-watch for sure. 5. Counterpart. Yet again, we return to Germany. A Germany split into two. Counterpart is the kind of high-octane international spy thriller you just don't see enough of. Led by the always excellent J.K. Simmons, Counterpart's the kind of twisting tale that any specific details might risk spoiling. So I'll just say it's the first of two shows on this list that's not only MGS in the sense of being tactical espionage action, but also science fiction. Counterpart starts with a bang and rarely lets up, with many elements an MGS fan would love, including even multiple identities, secret world wars, and a rather important role that's played by a cassette tape. 6. The Americans. It's no overstatement to say FX's The Americans is probably the greatest full-length spy show ever made. It follows the family of Elizabeth and Philip Jennings, two average Americans in the 1980s who just happened to also be Soviet spies. The real-life story of sleeper agents operating in American territory is stranger than any fiction. The Directorate S incident of 2010, also called by the US Department of Justice the Illegals Program, exposed 10 such individuals from Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, then active on American soil. The Americans shows how the SVR's predecessor, the KGB, ran similar operations throughout the Cold War. Created by a former CIA man, Joe Weisberg, The Americans is so compelling because instead of using the scandal to kick up yet another Red or Russian scare, it seeks to honestly, brutally understand spies and the lives they lead. Led by the unforgettable duo of Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys, as well as an all-around terrific cast, The Americans is just like MGS, and one of MGS-V's biggest influences, Breaking Bad, in that it's not purely concerned with the crime and the action, but also the human dimension that gives any of it meaning. 7. The X-Files, Seasons 1 through 2. This is a show and a creator yours truly finds sometimes unpalatable. But there's no question that even if Chris Carter's The X-Files may have ran too long and on occasion covertly snuck in a Ron Swanson level of paranoia against the federal government, it's still in the earlier years a major influence and even cousin of Metal Gear Solid. The one episode in particular I'd recommend for any Kojima fan is Season 1 Episode 2, Deep Throat. It has it all: secret enhanced super soldiers sneaking into a military base, and shadowy, paranormal-laden conspiracies. 8. Killing Eve. BBC's Killing Eve is a regular barrel of laughs. Dark, witty, funny, and surprisingly soulful at times, this is some serious MGS-level excellence right here. The show follows the cat-and-mouse love-hate dynamic between an international woman of mystery and assassin, Villanelle, and her British secret intelligence pursuer, the titular Eve. But when the MI6 woman Eve Pilastri starts to fall in love with Villanelle, all bets are off and all hell starts to break loose. The pairing of Sandra Oh and Jodie Comer, meanwhile, is a solid Liquid Snake-esque match made in heaven. Comer in particular inhabits the role of superstar hitwoman Villanelle with the maniac intensity and glee of the best villains from MGS. And the battle O's character Eve must endure not just against the many external forces seeking to control her, but most of all against herself, reminds me heavily of the sort of inner struggle that we find in virtually every MGS's protagonist. 9. Rubicon. This short-lived and woefully underappreciated early AMC shows about as MGS as you can get without any sci-fi, Japanese, or wanton bisexuality. Rubicon's about the topic MGS loved more than any: our minds, our world, and the fluidity of symbols, making it so hard sometimes to rectify the gaps that exist between them. Rubicon's about intelligence analyst Will Travers, who surprisingly works not in Washington, but Manhattan. The gradual unraveling by Travers of a vast Patriots-like conspiracy is rife with Metal Gearisms, but may be none so well executed as Rubicon's obsession with codes, symbols, and ciphers. If you want to know how crazy it feels sometimes trying to decrypt the multi-layered symbology of Hideo Kojima's games, just watch Rubicon for about 5 minutes, assuming it doesn't make you lose your mind. Apophenia is the tendency to mistakenly perceive connections and meanings between unrelated things, by way of Wikipedia. It's a fundamental principle of counterintelligence, to divert an unwanted potential spy with red herrings and ambiguous symbols, to trigger their apophenia. Just like when playing MGS, watching Rubicon's often a fun and gripping exercise in trying to tell apart distortion from insight, apophenia from real conspiracy. Rubicon's secret society behind world events may also be one of my favorites in fiction that isn't the Lalelulelo. And lastly, we have 10 Little Drummer Girl. The BBC's miniseries adaptation of spy novelist titan John le Carre's 1983 book, The Little Drummer Girl, is one of the best things I've ever seen. Set during the momentous year 1979, Little Drummer Girl follows a group of Israeli special operators and their new recruit, Charlie Ross. Though a vocal far leftist actor to her friends, Charlie finds herself and all her beliefs turned upside down by the sudden intrusion of a mysterious yet debonair man, played by Alexander Skarsgård, named Gadi Becker. Little Drummer Girl shows the commonalities between spies and actors in a delicious and explosively original way. Charlie has to infiltrate a Palestinian terror cell, not unlike the way Paz infiltrated MSF in MGS. Charlie has to be provided enough both rationally but also emotionally to make the Mossad's cover story as good as real, thereby becoming the ultimate mole. Led by Martin Kurtz, Charlie's Mossad spy master, played for good reason by the non-Israeli actor Michael Shannon, her clandestine mission leaves the viewer often totally unable, MGS style, to tell apart the real from what Gotti, in one exceptionally goose-pimply scene, dubs the theater of the real. And this has to do with the exquisite way that the show is shot. Little Drummer Girl is an exquisite and timely adaptation of a book by one of the greatest spy novelists ever. But even crazier than that, the miniseries, which spans multiple countries and languages and political affiliations, was directed by none other than Park Chan-wook, the Korean auteur behind such masterpieces as Joint Security Area and the Vengeance Trilogy. Well, that's all, folks. Enjoy some espionage television on me while I work on my next big project. Until next time, boss.